Hello everyone, I'm Susie. Today I'm going to talk about education in Singapore. Singapore is recognized globally as a high-performing education system. According to a global report by Pearson, Singapore places 5th in the developed world for education, followed by Finland, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Japan. In the 2009 Program for International Student Assessment, PISA, Singapore students did very well. Out of 65 countries select 2 parts in these tests, Singapore students ranked 5th in reading, 2nd in mathematics, and 4th in science. So, what is special about Singapore and Singapore's education? What are the major developments and features in Singapore's education, and what are the challenges of Singapore in facing education? Singapore is a former British colony with a population of just under 5 million. Singapore has made rapid economic development over the past 4 decades since attaining political independence in 1965. By the early 1980s, it had become known as one of the 4 Asian tiger economic powerhouses. With an ethnically diverse population within a small land, Singapore has been ruled over 50 years by the same governing party, the People's Action Party. And under the tight control of the People's Action Party, the education system has functioned as a means of supporting the national economic development and fostering social cohesion. Education has remained the second largest item in the government's annual budget. Now first, let's look at the levels of schooling in Singapore. The very first one is pre-primary schooling. Pre-primary schooling in Singapore is entirely in the hands of the private sector. Pre-primary schooling is not compulsory. Most kindergartens and child care centers teach the children how to write in English and the other official language like Chinese, Tamil, or Malay. Pre-primary schooling in Singapore links very closely to the academic needs of the first year of primary school. The next level is primary schooling. Singapore's primary schooling is compulsory. If the parents want to homeschool their children or send their children to the private school, they have to apply for exemption. The 6 years of primary schooling are nominally free and are highly subsidized by its education ministry. During 1991 to 2003, at the end of the 4th year of primary school, the students had to sit for a national examination in English, mathematics, and a second language. The results would determine which of the 3 streams they are to be in the rest 2 years of their primary schools. But since 2008, the streaming policy is not as rigid as before due to public complaints that streaming at such an early age is premature. The secondary schooling is the next level. Secondary schools charge much higher than the primary school and reflect more of the streaming policy. At the end of the 6 years of primary schooling, students have to attend the national examination, primary school leaving examination, to determine which stream they will be into for the 4 or 5 years of secondary schooling. In descending order of their academic performance and social prestige, the students will form 3 streams: express, normal academic, and normal technical. Over one stream move to another is possible, but from normal technical to normal academic stream is in reality very uncommon. After 4 years of secondary schooling, the express stream students sit for the National General Certificate of Education ordinary level examination. Success in this examination determines admission to pre-university courses, polytechnics, or institutes of technical education. The second stream normal academic stream students sit for the General Certificate of Education normal level examination at the end of 4 years. After this exam, the better performing ones will study for 1 more year and then sit for the ordinary level examination. The third stream is normal technical stream students. They are in general being prepared for post-secondary enrollment in institutes of technical education after 4 years of secondary schooling. Now the next level is pre-university. The courses in pre-universities last 2 or 3 years. Then the majority of the students sit for the General Certificate of Education advanced level. The pre-university curriculum is very academic and is highly geared toward university preparation. After secondary schooling, there are polytechnical schools which offers 3 years diplomas. Also, there are institutes of technical education, ITE, and they offer 1 or 2 year technical or vocational courses. The top one in education is university. There are 3 well-known public universities in Singapore: National University of Singapore, Nanyang Technological University, and Singapore Management University. Now let's look at this chart. It summarizes Singapore's primary education, secondary education, post-secondary education, and university education. We can definitely see the streaming policy here. Now I want to talk about Singapore's major features and major development. In 1920s, the starting education in Singapore was under the British rule. Later, there were 3 major types of schools appeared in Singapore: Malay schools, Chinese and Tamil schools, and English schools. During World War II, many students in Singapore dropped out of school, and these years were considered to be the dark ages in Singapore's education. During the 1950s and 1960s, when Singapore started to develop its own economy, Singapore adopted a survival-driven education system to provide a skilled workforce for Singapore. Apart from being an economic necessity, education also helped to integrate the new nation together. The bilingualism policy in schools was also officially introduced in 1960s, making English the official language for both the nation's integration and utilitarian purpose. Now I want to focus on Singapore's recent education development after 1980s. Since 1980s, the marketization of education became the main character of Singapore's education. It refers to the use of the language of market economics, including the use of terms such as choice, competition, and diversity in education. A key manifestation of the marketization has been the encouragement of the greater school autonomy through the independent schools and the autonomous schools. A major milestone in marketization of education was in 1985. Then the then Deputy Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong spoke and the need to allow more autonomy within schools. He also spoke about the need to give the right to appoint staff, devise school curricula, and choose textbooks, while conforming to nation education policies such as bilingualism and common examinations. Goh Chok Tong's sentiment was echoed by the following year by the then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. Some well-established schools were then given more autonomy and flexibility in staff development and salaries, finance, management, and curriculum, while still remaining the public institutions. By 1993, a total of 8 secondary schools had become independent. In the wake of the 1991 general election, the government took steps to diffuse public criticism of the independent schools. The Education Ministry allowed the establishment of a few brand new independent secondary schools. In 2009, there were a total of 13 independent schools and 27 autonomous secondary schools. But as long as the principals are held accountable for the students' performance in national examinations, these independent schools and autonomous schools cannot afford to stray too far from the mainstream curriculum. Furthermore, none of the independent schools or autonomous schools is allowed to stray from the key national policy initiatives. A major feature of Singapore's education over the past decades has been the intensification of the competition among schools. Besides improving the quality of education, competition is supposed to provide parents and students with a wider range of choices and improve accountability by forcing schools to improve their programs. The explicit measures to promote competition among schools arouse a great deal of controversy and criticism. One of the serious consequences of this competition is that there is a growing prestige hierarchy of schools and social stratification. While maintaining that all Singapore schools are good schools, it claims that it is only right to nurture the more able students, as the whole country will ultimately benefit. Hardly any school shows interest in positioning themselves as schools that cater for low-achieving students. In the past decades, there have been another policy initiative, Thinking School, Learning Nation. This Thinking School, Learning Nation policy was launched in 1997, including a reduction in curricular content from primary to pre-university levels to allow more time to be devoted in thinking skills and processes, and also the revision of assessment modes. Goh Chau Tung claimed that Thinking School, Learning Nation had to instill a passion for learning among students instead of having them study merely for the purpose of obtaining good examination grades. Now, on the surface, Thinking School, Learning Nations appear to be an inclusive concept that benefits all students. Many teachers and students may welcome this new policy initiative, but they are still in a well-entrenched modes of teaching and learning. Now, the Teach Less, Learn More movement started in 2006. It is still the continued development of Thinking Schools, Learning Nations. Now I want to talk about the challenges Singapore is facing in education. Forcing a sense of national identity has become a preoccupation for Singapore government for the past 5 decades. The lack of knowledge in Singapore recent history is very common among young Singapore people. They have not lived through the political events that led up to political independence. Now, having lived through poverty means that these young people might take peace and prosperity for granted. In 1996, Singapore's former Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew said, because they believe that all is well, they are less willing to make sacrifices for the benefits of others in society. They are more concerned about the individual and family's welfare than and success, not the community or society's well-being. Thus, the National Education Policy Initiative was launched in 1997. It aimed at developing social cohesion in students. Lee Kuan-yew called on every teacher and principal to pass on 6 key national education messages. The second challenge Singapore is facing is the potential impact income disparities on social cohesion. The highly educated Singaporeans are in a more advantageous position compared to unskilled workers. There's a great likelihood of widening income inequalities and class stratification. This tension between social inequalities and social cohesion permeates in the underlying framework of national education. Different emphases are planned for students in various levels of schools. For example, students in technical institutes are to understand that they will be helping themselves, their families, and Singapore by working hard, continually upgrading themselves and helping to ensure a stable social order. They must feel that every citizen has a valued place in Singapore. Lee Kuan-yew said the education system ought to produce a pyramidal structure consisting of 3 groups: top leaders, good executives, and a well-disciplined and highly civil-conscious broad mass. But it is somewhat difficult to reconcile this stratified view of society, in which individuals are still being classified based on their academic achievement. The globalization and overseas traveling has also a great impact on Singapore citizens' sense of loyalty and commitment. Another worry is that the persistence of ethnic disparities in education attainment. Ethnic Chinese are heavily overrepresented in local public universities and polytechnics. The racial prejudice is still very strong among the school students. Another challenge is some new immigrants come to Singapore for education. These non-citizens comprise about 1/3 of the entire population in 2009. It is rather ironic that such a large number of highly educated foreigners are being attracted to work and live in Singapore, but while the thousands of its own highly educated individuals are choosing to relocate themselves somewhere else. So, Singapore's education system has functioned as a means of supporting national economic development and fostering social cohesion. By many measures, Singapore education has been very successful. Its funding levels are perhaps unmatched in the rest of the Southeast Asia. But I'm personally amazed about the streaming policy in Singapore's education. This country is not going to waste any money or budget in educating the wrong group of students. Singapore tries to place its individual students to the right stream to foster a continual personal growth and dedication to the country. But it is a fact that each student is different, while with vast different skills and ability. While we should invest to help the gifted students to learn better and faster, but this should not be done at the expense of the rest. Also, the streaming policy is heavily depending on the academic examinations. The students in Singapore are facing high-stakes national examinations and they spend endless hours in drilling. Despite more than a decade of the Thinking School Learning Nation initiative, the principals, teachers, parents, and students are still focusing on academic examination success. Thus, they may not well develop enough the creative problem-solving skills, the ability to respond to open-ended questions, and the cooperative learning skills. And also the marginal subjects such as art, music, and physical education are neglected too. Studies have shown that passing standardized examination with good grades does not necessarily mean that one has a better knowledge. Excellent academic results should not be simply the only thing in education. Besides good examination results, the hard work, self-discipline, time commitment, time management, and mental capacity to learn and absorb the knowledge are just as important. So in the long term, the Ministry of Education should raise the educational level and perhaps encourage more performance assessment or authentic assessment than the traditional paper-pencil assessment. In conclusion, the Singapore education system has attained a certain amount of regional and international renown. What we are interested in seeing is whether the next phase of education success will flourish in a schooling system, and how Singapore is going to modify the high-stakes examinations to prepare its citizens in this globalization world. That's it. Thank you for listening.